Hey everybody, this is Hans from RebootMyGarage.com, and obviously the name of this movie is I'd Never Epoxy My Garage Floor, Here's Why. And before I get started, I just really want to say that a well epoxied floor can be just absolutely gorgeous. It is just, uh, it can just be stunning, and it can be very strong and long lasting. And there's very good reasons why all of these industrial places use epoxy to protect their floors and do it. And here's just an example right here. This is just absolutely gorgeous. It looks like sky. It looks like sea. It looks like a glowing lake or something like that. Just absolutely gorgeous. And and I mean, here's another one. This is just absolutely stunning. And you would look at pictures like this and go, that's just great. I would love my garage to look like that. And there's lots of reasons why you would want to have a garage that looks like that. But but you just really want to be going in there with your eyes wide open. I mean, uh, when I talk about these things, I'm talking about a professionally epoxied floor. All right, a professionally epoxied floor can last for decades and protect against chemicals and salts and just keep a good long lasting finish that's just going to be great. And you know who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want a floor that looks beautiful and lasts a long time and is durable and all of those things? So I understand the motivation to do this. I mean, if you're handy, you just might think, oh, I could do that. I could do that. I've repaired things. I've painted things. I've built things. I could do this, right? Maybe you can do this, but you know, I mean, it really is tempting, to look at all these beautiful results and think, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I'm a guy. I can do anything I put my mind to. But you know, just go into it with your eyes wide open. I mean, quite honestly, there's a lot to there's a lot to know. And the other thing to know is that it's really is a lot of work. It's just a lot of work. I mean, if you've ever painted a room or done anything like that, the prep work is really the key, and the prep work for a garage floor is a little bit different than other prep works that you might have encountered. Uh, you know, concrete is a permeable a medium, so you want water to be able to go through the concrete and come out the other side. Hopefully from the outside into the groundwater, and there'd be some kind of moisture barrier and whatnot. And you want to make sure that your garage actually doesn't have anything preventing water to go through. It's called water testing. You want to pour like a shot glass worth of water on a particular area of your garage and make sure that it disappears. So that and because if it doesn't disappear, that indicates that there's something on the surface that is preventing water from going through, and that's the kind of thing that's also going to prevent your epoxy from, sticking onto it. You also want to make sure you repair all the cracked and spalled areas. You can't, unless you want those cracks to show through, and I'm not sure why you would. You need to repair and fill in those cracks and get that all nice and smooth. Degreasing, make sure that there's no oil stains, any kind of stains on there. You really need to get that stuff out. And then when you're done with all that, you need to grind the surface. A lot of people talk about acid washing and just kind of acid etching and so forth. I just hear again and again from professionals that I've talked to that grinding the surface is really the only way to get a good bondable surface on your concrete floor. There's just nothing that comes close to doing that. And then once you're done grinding, even if you're using a grinder that has a vacuum attachment, you need to really get all that stuff up, because if you have a dusty floor, you're going to get an adhesion to the dust and not to the floor underneath. So all of these things, I mean, even before you even begin, it takes quite a while. It can take days to get all of this stuff happening, and it's expensive. I mean, the materials aren't cheap. The tools, chances are you don't have all the necessary tools lying around, so you're going to need to rent them and in some cases buy them. Do you have a diamond blade floor finisher grinder? Yeah, probably not. I mean, so you're going to need to get one and grind that floor. And if you have an angle grinder, good. You need to get into the corners there. You need to get a really good shop vac and get rid of all that stuff. You need a power mixer. You can't just take a paint stick and just kind of swirl around the epoxy. You really need to be able to mix that stuff well, and you need to be able to mix it in the proper ratio. So you need to make sure you're getting all of the hardener. For those of you who don't know, epoxy is a two-part thing. There's the epoxy, and then there's the hardener, and the two bind together and cure, and they need to have the right ratio in order for it to cure properly. There are cases where people didn't use enough mixer. They just kind of scooped it out of the can, and it didn't all come out, and they thought it was perfectly fine. Didn't really bother to get every last drop out of the hardener into there, or they didn't mix it properly. You need an electric mixer like this to get it going. And parts of it had inconsistent ratio. Some of it had too much hardener and started to cure fast. The other stuff didn't have enough. And if it doesn't have enough, it will be sticky. It will be sticky forever, because it's not drying, it's curing. And without the hardener, the epoxy is not going to cure to a hard finish. So it's really horrible mess if that stuff doesn't cure properly. And then you have a whole nother world of hurt where you need to get up the sticky epoxy and reapply it. So none of this stuff is cheap. And if you go into one of these big box stores, and look at the garage floor epoxy paints, even the water-based ones where you mix the two together, water-based is just not as good. It's just not as good as the solvent-based stuff. So you might get a couple of years out of a really good application of the water-based, then you're going to have to reapply and whatnot. And so I mean that's a lot of work for only a little bit of good results. To get a couple of years of good flooring, only to have to do it again and again and again. I mean, that's not why you're doing this kind of stuff, right? And there are some things that can go wrong. One of the things that you need to be prepared for is something called hot tire lift, and that happens more often with the water-based solvents, water-based epoxies, and with the solvent-based epoxies. And what happens with that is your tires are hot from driving around. You pull into your garage, and then the hot rubber sits on top of the epoxy. And as the rubber cools, it contracts. It kind of bonds a little bit with the epoxy and contracts and literally grabs some epoxy up and sticks it to the tire. And then the next time you drive off, you're yanking a little bit of that epoxy, or a lot, but sometimes just a little bit of that epoxy, and then you start to get these little tiny marks where the tires met the floor, and now you have these weird bare patches and whatnot. So that's something that can definitely go wrong, especially with the water-based ones. Bubbling and cracking. If there's an inconsistent blend, like I said before, you can get these bubbles that appear. You need to, if you blend it too hard, you can work bubbles into the epoxy, and you need to be able to get rid of those. Uh, and not only that, the floors can be slippery. Epoxy floors can be very, very slippery. So you need to make sure you treat it with something so that it, so that it isn't slippery. For your own safety, for your kids, family, whatnot. So there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. And then you also need to make sure you can control the humidity and the moisture level, and you know, so it can just be a real world of hurt. So if you're going to do something like this, if you're going to epoxy your floor, really look into getting a professional to do it, because they will have all the tools. They'll have done it again and again. They'll be able to do all the prep work. It can be very expensive, especially if you need to get your floor repaired beforehand. They do all of that stuff. So if you're going to do it right and get a professional to do it, and you'll do it once and it'll last for years and years. Don't get some handyman who's like reading the directions on the thing he picked up at a big box store and working through it like you would. Get somebody who really knows what they're doing, and this is what they do, and then you can decide whether or not it's worth it for you. But there are so many other options for you to choose from. One is staining the floor. An acid-based or water-based stain will adhere to the floor. It's not as glossy necessarily, but it's just a beautiful finish. You can do all sorts of cool effects with it, with modeling and whatnot, or just get a nice color going if you don't like the color of regular old concrete. You have these floor tiles, these interlocking plastic ones. You can work nice patterns into it. It'll protect your floor. You don't even have to repair it. If you don't want to touch your grease spots and your cracks and whatever not, you just want a nice looking floor, you can just throw this plastic stuff on top of it, and it'll withstand the pressure of your car. It'll protect against staining. Those things are virtually indestructible. And then if you just want to prepare your floor or just make it stronger, if you have a perpetually dusty floor, because concrete does dust up a great deal, you can do something with a densifying sealer. And what that does is it actually goes into the concrete. It penetrates the concrete and it bonds with it, and it makes it hard. So it hardens the concrete to prevent this constant dusting up. So if you have sort of a sandy kind of surface on your concrete floor, you can get rid of that with the densifying sealer. You can just do regular old sealers that will seal it. I don't always recommend that because it prevents, you're going to have to get rid of that if you ever decide to do anything else like staining or whatnot. So a densifying sealer will still leave a paintable, stainable surface on that. And if you really want to, you can just use containment mats. If you just want to not have your floor exposed to the road salts and chemicals and things like that in the wintertime, you can just put a containment mat under where your car's going to sit, and it literally contains the snow and whatnot. They're very chemical resistant. So there's lots of different options to go for before you rush off and decide to epoxy your floor. I would never epoxy my floor. You can Google that. I will never epoxy my floor. Here's what I would do instead, and get to the full article of all the things that we talk about. But Google it. This is Reboot My Garage. My name is Hans, and I'm glad to be able to talk to you.